You know, I've been doing these rip-off lists for a while now, but in actuality, one of the earliest videos I did was kind of a rip-off video, and I didn't even realize it. Way back in the beginning, I did a video on Romero spin-offs and pseudo-sequels, and honestly, I only scratched the surface. So, here we are again. Officially this time, actually calling it a Romero ripoff and knockoff video and heading back into the world of films that owe George a bit of a thank you, because they sure as hell aren't giving him any money. And hey, since it's Thanksgiving and all, you know that there's some turkeys in here. Number 10. Our first movie here is Night of the Day of the Dawn of the Son of the Bride of the Return of the Revenge of the Terror of the Attack of the Evil Mutant Alien Flesh-Eating Hellbound Crawling Zombified Living Dead. The opening tells us that a filmmaker named Lowell Mason wiped out the audio from the original Night of the Living Dead and replaced it, and that's pretty much what this is. They just dubbed silly voices over the original film, adding in fart jokes.
Program 1. Oh, God. Hello.
Gay jokes.
Okay, let's dance. Let me lead. 1, 2, 1, 2. How about a kiss, sailor? Okay, thanks.
Almost ruined.
And occasionally spliced in bits. This was actually created by James Riffle in 1991, and he had previously directed the Evil Dead-inspired House on Tombstone Hill, and used this as an extra outlet for filmmaking and comedy. And I suppose your enjoyment of this one probably depends on your sense of humor. And if you guessed that a white dude from Jersey in the early 90s would overdub Ben as a ridiculous racist stereotype, congratulations, you, I guess win?
You're a stupid white bitch, you know that? I'm sorry, alright, but you gotta grab a hold of your load, mama.
And do you know what this is? I don't know if you experienced this, but after MST3K became popular and you would watch movies with people, there was always that one friend that tried to riff along with the film, but unlike that show, didn't write material ahead of time or have comedic timing, so they just made dumb comments about whatever was on screen. That's this entire film. They even give a message to Romero.
Don't be angry with us, hombre. You should have got a copyright. Con bueno su loco mona Romero.
I mean, he's probably more angry that it's not funny than anything else. Because when your only jokes, and I mean only jokes, are racism, homophobia, and misogyny, I have to imagine that even the edgelords out there will get bored. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I have a huge tolerance for bad movies and very little for comedies that try too hard to be funny. And that's literally all that this one is, so I cannot recommend it. Number 9. Next up is a film from 2020 called Rebirth, and it begins in a very familiar fashion with two siblings going to visit the grave of a family member, although instead of Johnny and Barbara, it's Johnny and Adam. But they still sneak in the line.
They're coming to get you.
Barbara, we need to get a photo of Grandma's tombstone. Mom wants one.
And it all plays out pretty faithfully as you realize that this is indeed a full-on remake of Night of the Living Dead, with Barbara replaced instead by a gay male character played by Roger Corners, who also wrote and directed the film. These zombies have glowing eyes and are the classic Romero slow zombies, and it follows the basic storyline with minor variations, and he meets this version's Ben, with them eventually getting to the house. It pretty much just sticks with the original, as there's people in the basement, including an angry racist Harry, and apparently the eye thing happens when they are in the presence of a living person, so sometimes they glow and sometimes they don't. One of the changes they make is that they're aware that the zombie bite will eventually lead to death and reanimation, and some of the characters' deaths are altered. There's a smattering of the social commentary added in here to kind of bring the film into a modern context, even if it's seemingly set in the 60s, but it remains fairly faithful, and it's decent, but honestly doesn't really add a whole lot to the experience. I guess I've seen Night remade enough times now that I feel like I need a bit more to justify another one. Like, even the altered ending isn't that far off from what they did with the 90s version, except they just mixed it with the classic ending for good measures. And all said and done though, it's pretty well made, it's just kind of unnecessary. Number 8. Our next entry is an interesting take on the concept of the Ripoffs and its 2011's Memesis. If you're curious what the title means, Memesis is the imitation of the real world into forms of art and can be used to describe copycats. It starts with a farmer who has Night of the Living Dead on and soon discovers zombies in his house. It then cuts to a horror convention with the late Captain Spaulding as a fictional director who made a movie called Dark Heaven, which was also the title of a movie that Douglas Scholes, the director of this film, made. We meet Russell and Dwayne, and they talk to a girl who invites them to a private party. While there, they're drugged and wake up the next morning and are dressed as Johnny and Barbara in a graveyard. There's a zombie there that attacks Russell just like in the film, and Karen as Barbara goes to the house. Dwayne is there dressed as Ben, and they enter the house following the structure of the old film. They try to escape, but it turns out that there's a group of zombies keeping them there, and they kill Russell. Of course, there's more of the group in the basement, each filling a part of the Romero movie, and they figure out that they're in a recreation of it. The TV is actually showing the newscasts from the film, and Dwayne confronts one, and it certainly doesn't fully act like a zombie, and a shear to the neck takes it out. So the mystery of what's going on continues. To match the events of the film, the truck is rigged to explode, and there's a damn impressive full-body burn. And this one's pretty cool. I don't think that I want to spill what's actually happening to them, since it's kind of a fun reveal, and it's probably cooler to just see unfold. And overall, it's not a total win, since sometimes you just feel like you're watching yet another retread of Night of the Living Dead. But there's enough new stuff happening and intrigue that it makes it stand out a bit, and it's an interesting way to sort of do a remake. It's definitely worth a watch, and even squeezes a cameo from Bill Hinsman in there. And there was a sequel, in fact, that's similar and yet different and has no Romero influence, instead going a different route. Number 7. Here's a silly one, and it's 2019's The Mennonite of the Living Dead. And it starts with a farmer being killed, and it has found footage.
Nobody wants to watch 2 hours of your shaky-ass home movies.
Oh, you have no idea how much I agree. Thankfully, it's just that clip, and it switches to a narrative film with a narration.
Sure, but it's as true as any of those other based on a true story flicks.
Probably more true than The Conjuring.
Movie, are you trying to win me over? You may just have. It has some married couples headed up to a cabin for the weekend for some sexy times to spice things up, and it takes the whole meta self-aware route with talking directly to the camera, and some of the jokes work and others do not. But there is some good happening here.
Twisted Pine? Oh, you do not want to go that way. No one in their right mind goes that way anymore. Well, no, because it washed out a couple of months ago in the big flood we had up there.
The dead farmer has been awoken, and everyone is planning a big orgy, and they're worried about video, so they all agree to lock away their phones, although I'm not sure why they feel the need to put that box in the basement. The farmer starts to kill, attacking the group, and it turns out their sex magic is what raised him, and our main characters make some dick moves which make it kind of hard to root for anyone, and the fact is that our leads aren't exactly likable to begin with. It's a tricky thing to have your main characters be wise-ass jerky people, because it's a hard role to pull off and still be charming, and I'm not sure that's accomplished here. There's not much to do with Romero, considering that there's really no zombies except one, and he doesn't even look or act like it really. The real connection here is the title, and it's very possible that this entire film was based around that play on the classic film's name. Number 6. Now let's go to 2014 and take a look at The Day of the Living Dead from writer-director Thomas Churchill. It has a world in which a zombie outbreak is going on, but then flashes back to 1957 and a woman committing suicide, and then a man becomes a zombie and attacks his wife. And then an insurance agency that has a young black man working for them named Ben.
I don't know, it seems a little out there. Like that woman who stole $40,000 to pay for her boyfriend's divorce. And then she gets caught and wants to return it. I tell you, people, jeez. What a psycho.
I guess this is an alternate universe in which Marion didn't get killed in a hotel, and George goes to investigate, and then, holy crap, you're so cool, Brewster! But he gets killed after like 3 seconds, and this one is sort of a series of vignettes as George has vanished while trying to settle a claim, and his fiancée and friend go looking for him. Churchill himself plays a role in the film, who seems to be having a pretty damn good time doing the whole "you dirty rat" kind of thing. It's mostly in black and white, but occasionally the film goes back into color, and James Duvall sneaks in there as well. And I really like Duvall. He seems to have fallen away from doing higher profile projects, but also seems to be pretty consistently working out there in smaller projects. So outside of the title connection and the backdrop of it all, there's not really a lot of connections to Romero's works, but the inspiration is pretty clear. But with more Marilyn Monroe's, and I think this all connects. Like I said, it's sort of a collection of scenes that play out and are loosely related, but apparently was also intended as a possible origin story to Night of the Living Dead. Number 5. I think it's important to realize that zombies weren't all that popular in the 1980s, unless your movie ended with the phrase "of the dead" or "of the living dead," and Sam Sherman knew that when he released 1986's Raiders of the Living Dead. It kicks off with this solid track.
Does anybody care? The dead are after me.
And this is a really weird movie with a strange story. It starts the old-fashioned way with a big old tanker truck being hijacked by a leather jacket guy who then holes up in a nuclear power plant, and he's shot with some sort of, I think maybe taser gun. It's kind of unclear what happens here, but it causes him to do this. And then there's a chase leading up to him being electrocuted. Next, we meet young Flick before his porn career, because yes, the kid from the toy did porn, and he has created this laser cannon that he accidentally uses to kill his hamster. He made the laser gun from a VCR. Next, a dude comes across some pretty hilarious zombies in rubber masks, but there's also leather jacket guy, and I'm not sure if he's the same guy from the beginning. Morgan survives and asks out the woman who rescued him because, you know, when you're gearing up to stop a zombie invasion, sometimes you gotta kick back and enjoy the Stooges. And then this happens.
Hey babe, what do you got in the box there?
How you doing?
Hey, I'm talking to you.
Slow down, we want to talk to you. Come here, how you doing?
Hey, I'm talking to you. Hey, what's in the box?
Which only happens because...
I think you saved me. Oh, is that what happened? I went to do some target practice on the garbage cans and I missed. I heard somebody scream.
So to be clear, he saved his sister from being harassed by accidentally almost killing people by haphazardly shooting around with a full-on laser gun that he built from a VCR. Our two plots finally meet as Morgan ends up at Jonathan's house, and it's strange because it's not really like a full-on zombie invasion. They only seem to be coming after Morgan, and he does some research, and Zita Johann is here, and she's a classic actress who was actually in the Boris Karloff Mummy, and this was her final film. And here's the thing with this one. It was actually a different film called both Dying Day and Dark Night, and was directed by Brett Piper. Sam Sherman then bought it and added additional footage to it and retitled it Raiders of the Living Dead to cash in on the Romero series. There's a DVD available, or was available, with all 3 versions of the film to compare the original footage with what Sherman added. And it's just such a weird movie because there's so much less zombie action than advertised, and it's got that whole intro scene that's completely unnecessary to the rest of the film, and they made the weird decision to have the main hero and the villain look and kinda dress alike, but it has some fun moments, and it's got Scotty Schwartz blasting zombies with a laser gun that's just lines scratched into the film, so it's not a total loss. Number 4. That takes us to a little more obvious take on the theme with 2021's Night of the Animated Dead. It's an adaptation of the original film just in animated style with new voice actors. Catherine Isabel ginger snaps up Barbara, and McPoyle is actually Johnny. And they actually use the dialogue from Night of the Living Dead.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
Ben is voiced by Dule Hill, and there's a few minor additions to the storyline, like seeing the events leading up to Ben arriving at the farmhouse, and then the basement crew arrives, and it's Josh Duhamel as Harry, James Roday Rodriguez for a whole psych kind of thing, I guess, Katie Sackhoff as Judy, and Nancy Travis as Helen, so it's a pretty solid cast. But you may be asking yourself, why? They're just using the original dialogue with some minor changes, so what's the point really? Is this even necessary? You might think that they wanted to do it in animated form because there are things you can do in animation that aren't possible to do in live action, but there's really nothing like that here. They stick to as much of the original imagery as they can, but just increase some gore here and there, but nothing that couldn't be done pretty easily with actors. Perhaps to show off some top-notch animation. Well, nope, because although the animation is pretty good, I mean, it's not great, but it's certainly not bad. It looks nice, but it's not like it's impressive or unique. So I'm kind of not sure what the point was. Like, if you've already seen Night of the Living Dead, you're just gonna watch this and say, oh yeah, I remember this, and here it is again, animated. And if you haven't seen it before, I really doubt that this is the version you kind of want to break that cherry with. Like Rebirth earlier, it's not like this is a particularly bad effort, but it just feels overwhelmingly unnecessary. Number 3. Okay, here we go. 2001's Children of the Living Dead, which was executive produced by John Russo himself, and begins with a zombie outbreak already in place with guys taking them out. Sex Machine is here, and you're going to notice about 30 seconds in that this entire film is dubbed after the fact, and absolutely none of the dialogue appears to be spoken by the people on screen, to the point where it feels like you're watching a parody of Kung Fu Theater.
That's right, that's right. Here's a little present for you. Here it comes. That's right. Closer. Surprise!
And here's what this one is. For Night's 30th anniversary, Russo released a special version that was colorized and had extra scenes. I featured that one on my previous Romero vid, and it actually altered the story of the original. This film was intended to be a sequel to that version, so this was meant to be an actual sequel to Night of the Living Dead, or at least a version of it. This film claims that zombies don't attack kids, I guess, and there's some sort of super zombie named Abbott Hayes that kills Savini, and it jumps ahead to 14 years later, and the zombies have all been stopped, and there's a group of teens on a trip with equally off-sync voices.
The guy was killed in prison, so?
So, his body was missing from the morgue.
Albert Hayes is here, and he just kills everyone all at once, and then comes to claim them by biting them and making them zombies. And Hayes has some cool Vince Guastini makeup happening, and I love that it's a full 14 years later, and the deputy from the intro is here and looks exactly the same. And oh man, was the making of this one apparently a mess. According to both Russo and Savini, production was really troubled. Russo said that he had a script ready to go, and the guy fronting the money for the film loved it, but then as they got closer to filming, the financier decided to use his daughter's script instead and let her produce it as well. Savini thought that she didn't really know what she was doing and mocked the final product, saying the film didn't even deserve to be released. The director that was hired was also pretty bummed out about the experience, as he had people that he wanted to use and was instead forced to use the producer's friends as the cast and crew, paying them higher salaries than normal, resulting in some bad situations due to inexperience. 2 full days of footage were lost due to a camera mishap and all kinds of stuff. Wolf, the producer daughter, then stayed on set for the duration, firing anyone who argued with her about the script and refused to let actors make any changes to their dialogue, and ultimately fired the entire editing crew and hired her own editor to recut everything. Russo refers to it as the absolute worst film that he has ever worked on, and this is the man who had previously made Santa Claus. But you know what? They're right. This is practically unwatchable. Number 2. This next one also goes back to the 80s, and it's 1988's Flesh Eater. And this has had several different titles over the year, including Flesh Eater, Revenge of the Living Dead, Revenge of the Living Zombies, Zombie Nosh, and of course Zombie Flesh Eater. It begins with a group of teens doing a good old haunted hayride on Halloween, and a farmer finds a big stone with a pentagram on it, along with an express warning on it. So of course, dude immediately opens it and a zombie emerges. But it's not just any zombie. Nope, this one will look familiar to Romero fans since it's the very first zombie that appears in the Romero verse, the cemetery zombie that was portrayed by Bill Hinsman. Bill returns to the role here and in fact wrote and directed this film as a way of reviving his most known character. Of course, the guy he kills gets up and kills, and then he starts attacking the kids, forcing them to take refuge in a nearby shelter, but everything goes south pretty quickly, and pretty soon, the zombies are attacking all over town. And it's kind of a run-of-the-mill zombie story, but it's fine enough. This was only Hinsman's second directorial effort, and was his final one as well, with his only other credit being the slasher flick The Majorettes. This Dracula gives the best drunk performance of all time.
You're no fun anymore. I'm gonna go over here and drink with those guys.
But oddly, much like Day of the Living Dead, it's more a sort of collection of vignettes that are loosely connected more than it has an actual plot that goes from A to B. And as a writer and director, Bill makes sure to write himself plenty of scenes in which he attacks girls with no clothes on. When they form a zombie hunting posse, there's also another Night alumni in Vince here, who is Vincent Cervinsky, who also played a posse guy in the original film. But this guy's no Chilly Billy. And it's fine, but the ending just goes on for what seems like forever. Like I think I watched 7 movies while the ending of this one was happening. Number 1. And number 1, of course, it's Hell of the Living Dead from 1980, which is also known as Virus or Night of the Zombies. I was hesitant about putting this on here because it's going to be featured on the 80s Project like really soon, but there's no way I couldn't. It starts with an accident at a chemical plant via rat attack, and this music may sound really familiar.
Operation Sweet Death. Professor Barrett here. All emergency personnel report immediately to Module Antares. Red priority. See that all entrances are kept under observation.
And it's by Goblin, but they couldn't afford to get them to write new songs, so they just reused things that were from other movies. And hold on, did he say Operation Sweet Death?
Operation Sweet Death.
Well, what did he think was gonna happen here? Zombies happen, and then here's where things are gonna start to look familiar. There's a bunch of police prepped outside a building that's housing a group of criminals, and this is the guys who are going in some extremely deja vu looking outfits. And here's where I tell you that this film is by Bruno Mattei. Yes, Bruno Mattei, who directed Shocking Dark, which made it on my Alien ripoff list. Bruno Mattei, who directed Robo-War, which made it on my Predator ripoff list. Bruno freaking Mattei, who directed Cruel Jaws, which made it on my Jaws ripoff list. There is just no way that this obvious Dawn of the Dead ripoff doesn't end up here. I mean, listen. As a bonus, this was written by Claudio Fragasso, who of course directed Troll 2, but also wrote Robo-War. So there's also a group of reporters who soon discover that there's zombies on the island that they're investigating, and the commandos are here as well, and Mattei was assigned this project and expressly told to make it as close to Dawn of the Dead as he could. He was given a script that he didn't like and a mere 5 weeks to turn it around, although one thing that Dawn didn't have was a woman trying to blend in with indigenous people of New Guinea by stripping mostly naked and painting her body. George was kicking himself that he didn't think of that one. Oddly, the more it goes on, the less it feels like Dawn of the Dead, and with the island setting, it comes off later on as more of a ripoff of Fulci's Zombie. But let's face it, you put these guys in these costumes and play music that's directly from Dawn of the Dead, and then toss in a debate about how to deal with the zombies, and yeah, it's clear what you're doing. And I have to say that as far as the Mattei knockoffs go, it's probably the least entertaining, but it's still some good, silly fun. So there you have it, 10 movies that are just straight up remakes, knockoffs, ripoffs, just inspired by the title of George Romero's classic Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and the Dead series. And yeah, there's some fun in here. There's a mixed bag in this collection. There's a couple of things in there that I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun with. There's a couple of things that I thought were pretty decent, but, you know, just don't know if they were really necessary to have in this world. Like, what was the point? And there's a couple of clunkers in there that are pretty terrible. Looking at you, Children of the Living Dead. But yeah, if you've seen these and you enjoyed them, let me know down below in the comments. If you know of more movies that are just straight up knockoffs of Romero's classics, tell me down in the comments. Make sure you check out my earlier Romero knockoffs video, which is like, I mean, geez, it was out I think within the first year of my videos. It was very, very early on, so check that out as well. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. I'd appreciate that. And in the meantime, I'll see you very, very shortly for another great video. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.